So, guys, welcome back to the Kirk Miller Podcast. Today I have the amazing Ellie McKay on the podcast. As many of you listeners know, I love to bring in interesting people with fantastic stories, whether it's to do with health or it's to do with business, just life in general. And I know Ellie McKay certainly has a fascinating story. We got introduced by our great friend Gary Rhodes, who's been on a previous podcast. And he said, I think you'll get on. A lot of similarities. And I think we had, what was it, a 2.5 hour Zoom that we'd never spoken to each other before.
No, we had a shared love of all things self and professional
Yeah.
development, didn't we? And we found a mutual passion of Jim Rohn, our all-time favourite as well. And that was it then. That was 2.5 hours. That was only because I think one of us had an appointment, and we'd still be yabbering now, wouldn't we?
Yeah, exactly that. Whenever I connect with someone on Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn especially, I'm like, I need to, lock out a long duration, for the call. But thank you so much for giving up your time, Ellie, and being on the Kirk Miller Podcast. Just give people, just shoot from the hip straight away, a little bit of background about where you're at just now. I know obviously you've done so many things in business, and I'm sure we'll unpack today. It didn't start off that way, but who is Ellie McKay for the listeners?
Oh, God. The worst question to ask ever, isn't it? It's like, right, over to you, Ellie. Well, okay, so then 40 years ago, I was brought into this world. No, so I'm trying to think what would be the most relevant points for your listeners, because you've got a lot of high performance people out there that are
Entrepreneurs, exactly. Yeah,
interested.
and you were obviously an elite entrepreneur.
Oh, well, it's interesting what defines an elite entrepreneur, but I'm sure we'll come on to that later. There's certainly been many highs and lows, and continues, which continues to this day. But I was someone who left school at 16 with very few qualifications. So I was actually quite bright at school, but I just lost interest towards the end. I wasn't really very suited to that conventional education infrastructure,
Why do you think
which
that is?
you know what? It's a common denominator, isn't it? When you speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, we don't like to be told what to do. I'm very
I'm
anti-establishment
still that
as
now.
well. 100%.
Gabby will tell you that.
I'm unemployable. Like, I have to make this work. Nobody else will have me now. This is it. This is do or die, literally. And everyone's the same. But I'm blessed enough through my podcast and through masterminds and
Yeah.
the business over the last few years to be constantly surrounded with millionaires, multimillionaires, even the odd billionaire. And whilst not exclusively, the vast majority of them have left school with either no qualifications or very few qualifications. A lot of buzzwords get bandied around, like ADD, ADHD, dyslexia. I mean, I've had no assessments for any of those, but I'm quite sure I fall into
Yeah,
all of those
you and me
categories.
both. I think this is why we joked, didn't we? I just refuse to be labelled. I think one of the common things with a lot of entrepreneurs, isn't it, and other people who run their own business, you're generally a little bit mental, and
Yeah, you have to be.
you know what you like, you know what you don't like, and you struggle to stay focused on the things you don't like.
Oh, you know what? And the other thing that tends to crop up, there's almost two types of entrepreneurs. My husband's the polar opposite of me.
Okay.
Now, there's history of mental health in my family. I'm always somebody I'm somebody who's always struggled with depression most of their adult life, depression and anxiety. My sister's bipolar, my mum's bipolar. They've both been sectioned under the Mental Health
Shit.
Act. My sister has been sectioned more times than I've had hot dinners. And I know for an absolute fact I could go to the doctors today and
Yeah.
get a bipolar diagnosis with the extreme highs and the extreme lows,
Yeah.
which is why I'm so passionate about self mastery, life mastery, becoming the best version of myself, refusing to accept the extreme highs and lows. And actually, I used to talk a lot about mindset, whereas now I try to reframe that slightly. And whilst mindset is important, for me, it's a lot more about the emotional intelligence and the ability to be able to deal with the inevitable lows that we all experience, because there's nobody on this planet, regardless of how much money you've got in the bank, how well connected you are, how amazing your family life is, how great your physique is, that doesn't go through some form of hardship, whether that's financial, whether that's losing somebody close to us. There's, a multitude of things that can happen and do happen to us all. So one of the favorite Jim Rohn quotes that I like to quote at every given opportunity to as many people as I possibly can, because it just really deeply resonated with me, is don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. And going full circle back to the education system, I just constantly felt like I was being compared to a set of metrics that didn't really hold any interest to me. And it's quite interesting, actually, if you want to talk about ADD and ADHD. I think it's a load of bollocks, if I'm being honest with you, because my eldest daughter, Sienna, was labelled from probably age 2 from her local nursery. The staff, with the best of intentions, were telling us that they thought she had ADHD. We were very dismissive, my husband and myself. We didn't think that this was a thing. There was plenty of examples at home when she could concentrate, but then when she went to school, to primary school, got to reception, the same conversations were happening. First parents, in fact, we were actually called into the school to sit down. Oh, we think your daughter might be autistic. We definitely think she's got the traits of ADHD. Like, you need to go and book a doctor's appointment. So I remember sitting there at the doctor's. Now, obviously, you have to take your child in with you because you have to be able to do some sort of assessment, which is a little bit flawed in itself, because you shouldn't be having that conversation in front of your child.
No.
They shouldn't be exposed to words like ADD, ADHD, in my opinion, at age 4. Anyway, I had the conversation with the doctor. Look, the school basically sent me, I'm ticking a box here. I've got to report back to them, explained the traits, and I think I gave them some information that the school had given me. And the doctor just confirmed everything I thought, to be fair, because doctors do get a bad rep, and sometimes quite rightly so. But this doctor was absolutely incredible. And she said, look, your child has just sat there for 15 minutes straight watching Peppa Pig. If you had ADHD, you would not be able to sit and focus. Actually, usually, this is my own personal experience, I'm obviously not a qualified doctor, but I'm very much the same. If something doesn't hold my interest, if it doesn't captivate me, my mind is thinking about something else. The amount of conversations I've had with people that bore the shit out of me, and I'm just thinking what I'm going to have for my dinner, or oh, did I reply to that email? That is normal. But when I'm focused, when I'm stimulated, when I'm passionate about something, I am a woman on a mission, and a lot of the time it's just different learning styles. So anyway, I left school at 16.
Where were you? Was it Scotland? You were
Scotland, yeah.
Whereabouts in Scotland again?
A place called Linlithgow, which very few people have heard of. It's where Mary Queen of Scots was born. That's what put us on the map. It's actually a beautiful little place, but to grow up, it was boring. It was like sort of nice little pubs and places to eat, and there was a lovely loch to walk around, which is a Scottish version of a lake for the English listeners or the American listeners. And the beautiful palace. So to visit now as an adult, it's absolutely stunning. You think, wow,
you appreciate it more.
Really appreciate it, but bloody hell, it was just boring. There was no shops, there was nowhere to go and buy clothes. You had to go to the next town.
So what did you do?
We drank alcohol.
Really?
Yeah, from about age 14, that was a favourite pastime. Really terrible drinking culture, actually, in Scotland. Thankfully, I think the younger generation now are far more into their health and their fitness. It doesn't seem to be the same sort of connotations to growing up as we certainly had. But speaking to my husband, we're similar ages. He was brought up in Doncaster, very same story. I don't know if it was just a working class thing, but it was literally everyone. If you didn't drink, you were the odd one out. And I, at that age, all I wanted to do was to fit in and to be accepted and to be one of the crowd. I had quite a turbulent home life. My parents were going through divorce. My sister had very extreme mental health problems going on. So even from age 13, 14, that escapism was very socially acceptable and encouraged. So, we smoked a bit of weed. We drank a copious amount of cider. And when I say cider, that never seen an apple in its life. We're talking like chemicals, white lightning, quarter bottles of vodka and things like that. I mean, really, genuinely, we could have died. The amount of alcohol we were consuming at that young age.
So you started, was that 13, 14, you said?
Yeah. That was normal. And actually, I don't really talk about this much, but I mean, my mum and dad moved to this area because it was an affluent area. It had at the time one of the top 10 schools in the
Yeah.
whole of Scotland. It wasn't a private school, it was a state school, but it was up there amongst the private schools as well. But I always had this ability to find the, I want to say the dregs of society. That sounds incredibly judgmental, but
Yeah.
I was always somebody who would gravitate towards the more edgier crowd. And as I was somebody as well who was constantly getting bullied, I wanted to align myself with the fighters, the people who were hard, the people that were in gangs to give myself a level of protection as
Yeah.
well. So just want to be honest about that. It wasn't necessarily that trouble used to seek me out. I think sometimes I used to go and seek
Yeah.
trouble out. So yeah, it was really interesting. But it got to
Why did you get bullied? Sorry to
why
interrupt.
did I get bullied? Oh, I don't know. I struggled with it probably from primary school. I just didn't really fit in.
Yeah.
I remember going and asking permission because that's what you had to do in those days to the head of the class, whether or not I could join in, whether I could play. And the majority of the time she'd say no, the odd time she'd say yes. And it would be like the highlight of my month if I was
Yeah.
afforded the privilege of actually being able to interact with the other children. And something that as a mum myself, I'm painfully aware of with my own children. I really don't want them to experience that feeling. And then going into secondary school, it just amplified really. I wasn't particularly cool. I wasn't particularly hard. I wasn't particularly funny. I was just very middle of the line. And yeah, I used to do whatever I could to try and blend in and try and act the clown or do whatever I had to do. But yeah, it was quite a stressful time. And I kind of got to a crossroads probably about age 16. I dropped out of school. I'd done just enough to scrape to uni, but I was the youngest in my year because in Scotland they have a different cut-off to England. I'm born on the 28th of February. On the 1st of March, it's a new school year, like
really?
we have on the 1st
August,
of September here.
I didn't know that.
So I was the youngest
Yeah.
the next day.
Uh-huh.
If I'd have been born a few hours later, I'd have been the year below. So anyway, I did my hires, which is like your A-level equivalent at 16, but I couldn't go to uni at 17. So I decided to go to college instead. I was doing an HND in journalism, and then I was going to bridge to uni on year 3 or something like that.
So did you know at 16, I suppose there was, well, you probably didn't even know what entrepreneurship was at that point, but
Oh, there was nothing in terms of career guidance, nothing at all. My parents told me that I would make a good journalist. They said that I was going to be the next KAD. I didn't even know who KAD was. She was a war correspondent. So I kind of had it conditioned into me that I was going to be a journalist.
Yeah.
So that's what I went off to do at college. But I hadn't even really researched it, to be honest. And on day one, I thought I was going to be getting prepared for the war zone. It was going to be extremely exciting, but instead they're trying to teach me T-line shorthand and Scottish law and all this other stuff. And yeah, I was just
So how long did that
bored
last?
shitless. 3 to 6 months, and I quit, and then I went full time at Burger King, which would be my side hustle. And my family were going mental, but also at this time, so I quit college, and I found myself round at this girl's house, who was about 10, 15 years older than us.
Uh-huh.
She was a regular heroin user.
Shit.
She was an alcoholic. She was in and out of prison. And it was one of those people, I don't know if you had one in your local area, that used to basically open the doors to anyone to come in, just probably for a bit of company or whatever. So from age like 14, we'd been going to this girl's house because we thought it was cool and she was like really hard. And
course, yeah.
at that time, that's the sort of thing that impresses you. Obviously, you look back with hindsight with, very different perspective on that. But yeah, I found myself sat there on like a Tuesday afternoon or whatever it was, drinking cider. And a guy that I'd been sort of seeing had just died of I think it was a methadone overdose. He'd been a heroin user, but it was actually methadone that killed him.
Yeah.
We weren't seeing each other at the time. It was nothing serious, but he was somebody that was in my wider group, and I had been involved with him, and it really kind of shook me to the core. And I kind of knew at that point that if I stayed in Linlithgow, if I continued down that path, I would be dead or in jail.
So how did you change? Because obviously I can imagine, like, say if you're in a unique part of Scotland, and it's like, where do you start? What's the next? How do you? Because there'd be a lot of people who maybe have been stuck in an environment, or maybe currently stuck in an environment, think, well, what do you do? Like, maybe it's a little bit easier when you're younger to make these decisions, but or maybe it's worse when you're younger to make these decisions. But what did you do?
Well, I didn't really have much support from my family. They were both dealing, my mum and dad were both dealing with their own shit. They just got divorced. Both my mum and my dad were going through mental breakdowns. They had a lot on their plate with my sister. They were also in the process of going bankrupt. So we'd went from having the lovely big detached house and the 5-star holidays to the bailiffs at the door to
Did they?
repossess our things.
So did they run businesses themselves then?
Yeah, they were in textiles. They
Okay.
ran shops. They were in retail, and they did very well for quite a few years. But it all came tumbling down like a house of cards. They made some bad business decisions, and ended up with the bailiffs at the door. So we were kind of dealing a lot, and again, that probably factored into the escapism as well.
Yeah.
Really volatile home life, but I don't know. I recognised. I don't remember having this thought process, but there was some sort of inner grit inside of me that recognized that no one was coming to save me. I did know with absolute certainty that if I stayed where I was, my life would amount to nothing. I would be doing the same thing year in, year out, and it wasn't going to end well for me. Because people in the environment that I was associating at that point were held in high regard if they even had a basic menial job, because that was unusual. The vast majority of them were on some form of benefits,
Yeah.
sickness benefit or job seekers allowance or whatever else. By this point, I transitioned from Burger King. My friend, she was earning 40p an hour more than me doing double glazing. So cold calling. And when I found out that you could get paid to talk, fucking hell, I was buzzing. Can you imagine?
Do you think that was maybe the first cue, an emotional feedback that you're born to talk? Because obviously now you've got a monstrous podcast, but it just took a little while to get there. So talk me through that transition. How long did that last for?
Oh, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So much so, I mean, I was really, really good at it. There was one point when the regional manager came in and pulled me into his office and then went through to the room. And I could see because there was like a big glass window, because the sales managers like to be able to look through the telesales department. And I'm thinking, oh shit, I was the only one called out. There's like 30 of us in this room, and Ellie, get through, I want to speak to you. So I'm just sort of sat there, and then he disappeared. I'm thinking, what on earth's going on? And I couldn't really hear what was being said, but I could hear he was really animated. He was talking to the 30 telesales canvassers on the other side of this window. And then one by one, I'm seeing them all get in their jackets, get in their coats, and walking out. And anyway, he comes back in 5 minutes later and he went, yeah, right, go and carry on with your shift then. No explanation. I found out subsequently that he'd fired every single person, including the manager and the assistant manager, apart from me, for underperforming. And I resumed the rest of the shift by myself. So, yeah, it was that was really interesting. But I ended up just doing really well. I got promoted very quickly to assistant manager and then manager. Actually, my first week of being an assistant manager, my boss at the time's son unfortunately got very poorly and he was off for quite a few weeks. So during that period, I stepped up to be acting manager, just whilst he was dealing with his family stuff, and managed to outperform all his previous records.
Why do you think that was? And what age were you when this happened?
17. I was only 17.
You were 17?
Yeah, I was 17 at the time. No limitations.
And you had a son at that point as well?
A son?
No, I thought you said you had a son.
No, God, no. There's no son involved here. I could have done it. Could have been a whole different story, but no, nothing like that. So basically when he came back, they demoted him and made him my assistant. But to answer your question, I think it was just no fear.
Yeah.
No fear of failure at that point.
Do you think that's because you had nothing else to lose? You have nothing to lose?
Possibly. And also, as daft as it sounded, I just loved what I did. I was really passionate about it. I truly believed in the product or service. I believed that I was helping people. And actually that's something that's really important to me to this day, because if you feel that you're making someone's life better from something that you've got to offer, then that passion can come through. And I'm not someone, despite my sales ability, that can sell something that I don't actually believe in. It actually turned out quite a few years later, I found out that the windows and doors I was selling were a load of crap, but I didn't know that at the time. I truly believed that
Yeah,
these
but
were the
just shows though,
best
doesn't it? If you
windows
actually believe,
ever.
like you say, if you believe in the product or even someone that you're trying to promote or sell, then if it comes from the heart, then people will believe whatever you say,
Yeah.
you know.
You know what's really funny as well, though? So during that period from like age 17 to age 21, 22, I was really into self-development.
What got you into self-development?
That environment, because I was a manager, we were having our weekly meetings, we were
Mm.
having monthly meetings, we were having regional meetings, I was
Mm-hmm.
going to national meetings. There was a lot of Tony Robbins quoted, Zig Ziglar.
Oh, even then?
Yeah. It was all about mindset. It was all about belief. It's
Who did
sales.
that? Did that must have come from? There's always someone though who instigates that. Was that the leader, the boss, or because it's
I think
not everyone's aware of that. I know I wasn't aware of Tony Robbins till I was late 20s. You know.
Yeah, I suppose just being in sales, it was all performance related. It was
Okay.
target driven. I didn't actually go, but a lot of the senior managers were invited to a Tony Robbins event like back in the day. That's 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember reading Paul McKenna's book, How to Change Your Life in 7 Days, when I was about 20 or 19. And that stopped me from smoking. I'd smoked from age 14 to age 19, 20. And yeah, that book, the power of the belief, that was hugely significant in my life at the time. But what's interesting is after I left that sales environment for a multitude of reasons, really it's excuses, but I felt like I needed to be more present for my family. I needed more of a 9 to 5 job where I could travel back to Scotland. And
What age was that? And what did your family look like at that point?
22, 23, my sister was quite unwell. My parents weren't particularly coping with it. In a lot of ways, I was the responsible adult in that situation because they were dealing with their own stuff as well at the time. No one asked me to do it at all, but I took it upon myself to quit my job and get more of a 9 to 5. And my salary went from up here to down there. I needed a second job just to be able to
What did you
pay
do?
the rent and
What job
things.
did you do?
I went into recruitment. I went to a 16 grand a year job in recruitment, being told what to do, which I'd always had autonomy. I'd always been in a management position, really, from leaving school. I'd been quite fortunate in that sense. I was the one who set the rules and set the routines to a degree as well. I was responsible for over 100 people. And then I'm starting work and I'm being told, yeah, you need to get in 30 minutes before we're paying you, which is fine. I'm quite a diligent person anyway, but I don't like to be told I have to do that. It's not cool to take a lunch break. You have to ring this amount of people between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, 30 sales calls. Then between 10 o'clock and 11:30, you do this. And, for somebody like me, that's just not really how I operated. So I absolutely hated it. I needed a second job just to make ends meet. But I stopped doing any kind of self-development. In fact, I completely flipped 180. I thought it was all a load of American happy clappy nonsense.
What changed though? If you knew that was working before?
I don't think I made the correlation between what I was putting into my mind to the outcomes I was getting. It was almost like that was just a coincidence or something I was doing alongside it. I just happened to be really successful anyway, and within that environment,
that was just
supported
part
it.
of the That was
That
just
was
part
of the journey.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did become a victim. Woe is me. I went from being pretty well off financially to, like I say, running 2 jobs. My husband and I got into a bodged property investment deal. This was before we were actually married. This was 2006. We both kind of knew he was an electrician. Well, he still is an electrician by trade. And we both had reasonable salaries at the time, not, nothing fancy at all. I knew we were capable of more. So we did what all self-respecting budding entrepreneurs do, and we sat down on a beanbag and Googled "get rich quick." And that is a true story, honestly.
You actually Googled the words "get rich quick"?
Yeah, well, it was probably Ask Jeeves or something at the time. Yeah, we did.
Shit.
And it was a toss-up between stocks and shares. and property development. So we bought this off-plan property, and to
Were you
be
saving? So you just got some savings.
no, we didn't have any savings. We were encouraged by the bank to take out loans and things, which we've now found out that you're really not meant to do. The property developers that we signed up with put us under a huge amount of pressure. But in fairness, this was back in the day where you could buy a property, you could flip it on the same day
Yeah.
and just take that profit. But we got stung by quite a few different things that were out of their control to a degree. Firstly, the development got flooded. So the whole thing was years and years later to the point of completion.
Yeah.
Now, by the time it was finished, it was 2010. So we were smack bang in the middle of a global recession. And this property that was meant to have been worth 200 grand was worth 60. We couldn't even get a mortgage on it. The whole thing was so stressful. They nearly took us for everything that we had, which wasn't much at the time. You're talking a semi-detached house in the arse end of Doncaster and a couple of second-hand cars, but they were coming for them. And I remember having a complete mental breakdown. There was all sorts of stuff going on with my family. I was getting bullied at work. I worked in the prisons at this point, and that's actually when I went on medication and ended up remaining on medication for best part of a decade after that.
Yeah, can you share with the listeners? I mean, you don't have to, the specifics of the medication.
It was for depression.
Wow.
It was for anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's the worst thing I could have ever done, because whilst medication may have a place, and I'm obviously not coming at this from a medical professional angle, I'm only speaking about my own experience. At no point really was I looking at my own life. It was very situational, the reason I was so depressed and anxious and upset. As I mentioned, I was getting bullied at work. We had all this family stuff going on. We were on the verge of financial ruin. I was also self-medicating by drinking alcohol. I had no clue about hydration. I did very little exercise at that point. I was a very negative person. I used to start my day watching BBC News, which is like...
It's not going to help you.
It's not going to help anyone. Obviously bad news sells. And there were so many things going on at the time, but it didn't really occur to me at that point to look within. It was, and I wasn't encouraged to do so either. With my network at the time, people can only give you advice based on the knowledge that you've got, and often it's with the best of intentions. But if you've never been shown the coping mechanisms to deal with these situations, then you can't impart that knowledge on someone else. But yeah, the doctor put me on all sorts of medication. That dose just kept getting increased over and over the years. I remember it would get to a certain point in the night, and it was like the light just went off. I could be mid-conversation. It'd get to about 9:30 at night, and my eyes would literally shut. And I remember actually being at a family party once, sat in a bar stool, and everyone thought I was absolutely hammered, but I wasn't. It just got to a certain point in the night, and I just fell off like the bar stool.
I mean, you weren't drinking?
I was drinking,
But
not to the extent that would warrant that. This was a regular occurrence.
Just drugs,
Yeah, and if it had made me happier, then I'd be the first one to say, yeah, brilliant. But it didn't. I had years looking back now where I was a shadow of my former self. And for all those people who met me within that time period, they wouldn't have necessarily known, because they didn't know the old Ellie. They had nothing to compare that to. But I was a victim. I couldn't wait to tell anyone who would listen about the hardships that we'd endured. Oh, you couldn't make this up. The developers screwed us over. The site got flooded. This had happened. They said it was going to be worth this. And my family have done that. And this person's bullying me here. And I was promised this promotion. And that person over there got it. And, everything was just negative, negative, negative. So, yeah, it was...
And how long did that continue?
Oh, about a decade, best part of my life.
Yeah. No. Look, I can relate to that on a different scale, Ellie. From 20 to 26. After the football, you're a plumber. You're moaning. I've actually got Facebook statuses to prove how negative and how victim mentality I was. And you reap what you sow. What you focus on expands, as the great Tony Robbins says. And it's amazing what you focus on. If you're focusing on problems.
Yeah.
And what's not going right, and that bill or that problem, you heap more on it. It just attracts you attract more of that.
Where focus goes, energy flows.
Yeah.
And whilst I'm never blaming anyone who's perhaps going through a hard time or whatever you feel, I just don't want what I'm about to say next to get misconstrued. I do believe in the law of attraction. I do believe that we can
I agree.
attract energy, and all of these seemingly unrelated tasks. To me now, when I look back, it's no surprise that I had the antennas up. You know, this is what I was drawing into my life by the words I was using, by the actions I was taking, by the beliefs I had, by the values that I upheld. And it wasn't really until significantly later that, and it was actually going back to Tony Robbins and something Tony Robbins said that was the light bulb moment for me that started to ignite an old fire that had extinguished many, many years before. So fast forward to 2018. My husband, in the meantime, we narrowly avoided financial ruin. We managed to scrape together the money to complete on this property. We've still got it in our portfolio to this day, by the way, and it's still not worth a fraction of what we paid for it. But not that I'm bitter or resentful. But my husband, he went off and built a successful electrical installation business. I didn't want that. I had no desire to be an entrepreneur. I wanted the comfort and the security of knowing exactly what I was going to get paid, exactly what day I was getting paid. I enjoyed the structure of knowing how many holidays I was going to have. I enjoyed getting paid for those holidays. And, you know, I know people that have got very different views on this, and I respect their opinions, but I don't think entrepreneurship and business is necessarily for everyone. And it definitely wasn't for me at that point with my mental health in that state. But in 2018, my husband, our business partner, his cousin, this all sounds really random, but he'd been on a property course, a property education course. And I'd never even heard of this. You know, I wasn't familiar with the wealth creation space or anything like that. I had absolutely zero desire to return to property. I hated property.
Especially after your experiences of what you've gone through with that first project.
Yeah. Now, up until this point, I'd only ever bought one home, and that was our family home that we bought in like 2014, apart from this buy-to-let property that we'd had. So anyway, my husband and our business partner, still our business partner to this day, we're going to go on this property education course. And as part of the work or whatever you do beforehand, he was listening to some of the videos. Now, the first module was on mindset, and he had it playing on, you know, through Apple TV on the kitchen telly. And I walked into the room and doing whatever I'm doing, making a cup of coffee and what have you. And I can hear Billy, who's a good friend of mine now, actually, he's going to be kicking off my Elevate business event that I'm just about to
Who's that, Billy?
launch. Billy Farrell.
Okay.
I always call him the master of marketing and mindset. He actually has nothing to do with property anymore. But he was quoting Tony Robbins, and the words he said are etched into my brain and will be till my dying day. He said, if something's humanly possible, then it's within your reach. Now, I don't know what it was about that particular sentence that triggered me. But like I say, it just reignited a fire that had been dormant for such a long time. And it was just enough. Obviously, you don't go from being absolutely on your ass with your mental health and, you know, very poor routines and disciplines and lifestyle habits to that being an overnight fix. But it was enough for me to ask the question, why not me? And it was enough for me to book on the property training course with my husband, which I wouldn't have done had I not listened to that particular sentence.
I mean, what a powerful thing to say, why not me? I mean, that can be applied across anything. Even if you're listening to this, because I know we've got a diverse range of people listening to this who maybe an entrepreneur or someone just simply looking to improve their health. Why not me?
Yeah.
Something as simple as that. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Everyone starts somewhere, right?
Yeah, 100%. So that was the start of it, really. My husband and I attended the property training, and for me, property's never really been my passion. I found that out not the hard way. I'm really glad that we got involved with that, and my husband really took to it.
Yeah.
But for me, it was more about who did I need to become. So when I looked in that accountability mirror and I listed the attributes of a successful entrepreneur, a business person, a property investor, and I asked myself the question, what does that look like? Well, you need to be articulate. You need to be well educated in your subject matter. You need to be well presented. You need to be able to do public speaking. You need to be able to communicate and talk with confidence and build relationships and all of these other things. And I scored myself against each and every one of those attributes. And the reality was, I failed abysmally in pretty much every area. So the question that I asked myself wasn't what I needed to do in order to become that person. It was, who do I need to become in order to achieve those goals? And I think so many people focus on the wrong things, especially initially. They're looking for that 3-step or 5-step guide to being able to achieve the goals. But really, and this is where the beauty of any sort of self or professional development is, it's the person that you need to be in order to get there. Really, that's the fun part, isn't it? You know, it's actually ripping up your current reality, not accepting your own bullshit, and going to war with yourself.
Because when you have to become a certain person, it forces you to grow, which is a spiritual need. And as a result, you growing comes the other needs that Tony Robbins talks about: certainty, significance. And then if you can, as you're growing and you're making a difference as well, you pair that with contribution, it's meeting another spiritual need. And then that becomes an addiction, but in another roundabout kind of way, you're expanding your identity, which so often we get stuck mentally and emotionally because we're not growing. We're not becoming a better person. And God, it's such a simple thing to do. Who do I need to become today? Who do I need to be today? I say that often to my clients. I say it to myself. I look myself in the mirror and go, who do I need to be today? Instead of just, what do I need to do? Who do I need to be today?
And it's ever evolving as well. So you start to, you and I spoke about this when you came on my podcast, Kirk. I set to work to become that person and started achieving those goals. But actually, it's not until you start ticking some of the boxes that you realize you're asking the wrong questions and your priorities change. Now, the bit I didn't mention was I was made redundant somewhere along the line. I was on my second consecutive maternity leave, which is a story in itself because my husband was booked in for the snip. We were done at 2. And the Friday before he was due for his procedure or his consultation, on the Monday, I found out I was pregnant with my third and
Oh, wow.
absolutely final, beautiful little boy, Sammy. So the universe had different plans, and I'm super grateful that it did. But I mean, obviously, it didn't feel like that at the time.
Yeah.
Now, I was made redundant whilst I was still on maternity leave, and there was a period I actually found myself claiming benefits. I was walking into that job centre with a double pram, filling out pages and pages of paperwork to literally get £70 a week. And it was quite a degrading process because when I worked in the prisons, we'd work very closely with the job centre. We used to have members of the job centre coming into the prison regularly, and they actually had a desk in our office. And I was there with my children. And an old colleague came up to me, "Oh, Ellie, it's brilliant to see you. Didn't realise you're back off maternity leave. Great to have you back." And I was just like, "Oh, no, actually, I'm not here as a member of staff. I'm here just as a delegate, sort of handed in my forms and pointing at my children." And yeah, it was definitely a moment that I will never forget. And I thought, how has my life come to this? How have I been someone who was in a relatively high performance job, responsible for up to 100 people in my heyday, and now I'm sat here begging cap in hand for
What do you think?
£70
What do you think?
a
What do you think
week
the core reason was?
for claiming the benefits?
Yeah, or just from getting you to that moment.
So I was made redundant, which was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, sometimes these things are out of your control as well.
Absolutely. It was a really mundane, mediocre job that offered me absolutely no stimulation. It wasn't a job I'd signed up for 9 years previously. It was just a box ticking exercise. We weren't actually helping the prisoners to resettle in any way or to upskill while they're in prison. The whole system's a bit of a joke. I used to find it incredibly frustrating looking at the level of incompetence that surrounded me, often from people who were earning significantly more money. And it wasn't something that I had any passion for. But when I got the call to say I was being made redundant, it felt like the worst sort of day of my life, because you're used to that security, you're used to that comfort blanket. And there's probably a lot of people, good as the enemy of great, it really is. It was a bit of a sliding doors moment. I often think, what would have happened, if I'd not been made redundant? The truth is, I'd probably still be there claiming my 30 grand a year, working 4 days a week, no stress, no hassle, no stimulation. And,
no flexibility either, of course. Don't forget, there's
no,
yeah.
no, but I mean, like I say, there's pros and cons of every which way, but how many people are out there not scratching on their potential, not even exploring what they're capable of? Because I wasn't through that 9-year period, and well, probably a 15-year period or what have you. Yeah, about a 15-year period. I was very happy to live that mediocre life, and actually had very little awareness that I was living a mediocre life as well. But the other thing was as well, I've been conditioned to believe, again, it's such a limiting thought process, really, that if I didn't claim my job seekers allowance, that I wouldn't be eligible to get my national insurance contribution and my pension and things when I'm older. It's all geared around not taking ownership for your own life, your own retirement, your own finances, outsourcing that to the state almost, because it's not like we were in a situation where we particularly were dependent on £70 a week.
Of course.
We weren't that destitute. I don't want to insinuate that we were. We were in a nice detached house, 2 holidays a year.
But you weren't working.
Fuck all in the bank, though. Typical middle class.
Yeah,
we lived beyond our means. We had no idea about wealth management or anything like that. As soon as it came in, it was going out. And I truly believed that if I had any gaps in my national insurance, this would be like the worst thing ever, because that's what I was told, and that's what was reinforced in my life. But yeah, when I hit that rock bottom, when that ex-colleague had said to me, great to kind of have you back, that was a defining moment. And I knew that this wouldn't be my reality. I knew that I was destined for more. I wasn't sure how that was going to look, how that was going to turn up, but I knew that this was a very temporary situation, and it was a very temporary situation. I was only on the benefits for a matter of weeks, perhaps a couple of months, absolute most. It's a bit of a standing joke actually between my husband and I, because we went to this property training event, which was 4 or 5 days, and you were there from like 9 in the morning to 6, 7 at night, and it was intense.
Of course.
It was really, really intense, and everyone's there suited and booted, and at the end of it they have a bit of a closing ceremony, and the sort of bubbly comes out, and everyone does a bit of a toast, and it's all a bit of a ritual, and everyone's really pumped up. You can see the potential to go make money, and it's just fantastic high level chat. And I got a little ping through on my phone, this is to remind you, your next job centre appointment is tomorrow at 9 a.m. And I was just like, oh my God, if the people in this room knew. And it was, it was quite funny, really. We put a high-level mastermind on a credit card at that point, which I'm not necessarily encouraging other people to do.
You took a chance.
But we took the chance, yeah. We kind of went balls deep, to be honest. Again, this is not for the faint-hearted. This is not financial advice, but we were in the process of selling our family home, and it fell through. So we took the decision to move into a rental and to spend every single penny we had, which was about 150 grand. That was everything, all our money from the property sale, and invest it into not only our business, but our self-development as well.
Wow.
Yeah, we call it balls deep. We just went balls deep.
What so was it the Tony Robbins that the first big that self-development from that money?
So I joined the high level property mastermind. I joined business masterminds. I went to go and see Tony Robbins, went to Robert Kiyosaki. Whenever I went anywhere as well, it was front row. It was the best tickets, because I wanted the best experience. And also, and I mentioned this to you as well when we were talking about Tony Robbins earlier, that big part of our business model, particularly back then, was raising private finance for the properties. So you have to get around people with money in order to stand any sort of chance. So if I'm being completely transparent, not only was I getting the self-development, but this was a great way of building relationships, connecting and getting investors as well. Pretty much every time I went anywhere, I would have a conversation with somebody. Oh, what do you do? Oh yeah, property. We've got property investment business. Oh right, okay, we're interested in investing in property, but we don't have time. This is passive.
Okay. Wow.
Next thing you know, I'm coming back with 100 grand investor in my back pocket. So,
Yeah.
it,
But
you
you
know,
literally from that house sale, you poured. Not many people could sell a house and go, right, I'm going to put this into a personal development, a property course with no guarantee.
oh, it was insane.
Yeah. But okay, let me ask you a question. Obviously, right? How what made the biggest difference in obviously them building a property portfolio company? Was it knowing how to build a property portfolio company, or was it the mindset shift?
Mindset. 100% mindset.
Why?
Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you are right. Henry Ford, I really stand by that. Of course, belief on its own is not enough. I mentioned law of attraction. Law of attraction without law of action is
Mm,
a little bit pointless. I'm not going to sit around meditating and just
I get
manifesting
it.
properties to turn up. But you do have to visualize it. You do have to truly believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself before anyone else will. How if you don't believe in yourself, how can you go out there and expect other people to back you?
Mm,
Because you've got this great vision and it's got to kind of come from within, but you've got to have the education to back it up. You've got to have the knowledge to back it up. You've got to have the tools in your armory. And it's also worth saying as well, although we were new to the property business, my husband was 10 years established with his other
mm,
business as well. So he understood certain processes, whereas I'd never even
mm,
had any exposure to self employment. I was used to turning up at a certain time and
mm,
being told what to do to a degree. If you get a sale, then you input this into the computer and that goes to that department.
hmm.
And these systems and
Yeah.
processes were already in place. I was never the person creating these systems and
Mm,
processes from scratch. So yeah, it was a bit of an eye opener. I remember sitting there after the property training on the Monday morning with my laptop and my notepad, and we got to the office and everything else.
mm.
And I was like looking at my husband, I'm like, right then, what do I do first? And he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I was just like, what?
Shit. Yeah.
What? I've got no idea. Like, do I just look on Rightmove? Like, what do I do? I'm
Yeah.
just really used to someone telling me,
Yes.
even though I had a lot of autonomy in my
Yes.
management jobs, there was still a structure there.
Yeah.
You still an onboarding process. So yeah, it was a baptism of fire.
Yeah.
It was a real challenging time as well, working with my husband for the first time and
Yeah.
finding out roles and responsibilities, because again, that's not something that's clear. You're wearing a lot of different hats. You're the only two
Yeah. I get
people
it.
within the business, so
I get
you're
it.
you're everything. You're responsible for the sales, the marketing, the
Admin.
accounts, the admin, absolutely everything. And you're trying different jobs and realizing that actually you're not very well suited to those, and that causes a lot of conflict and tension, and there was a lot of friction in those early days as well. And my husband and I, who my husband's
How did you? Because this is great. Because I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs and stuff listening to this. How, and you might not know the answer to this off the top of your head, because I'll put you on the spot here. But
oh no.
how quickly did you know, or was there a certain thing, like a week to week meeting with your husband that you did, where you determine, like, I'm good at this, you're good at this, I'm good at this, like, because a lot of people were like, I mean, one of the things I remember Tony Robbins saying on a Forbes interview, and it always stuck with me, is who are you and who do you need? And sometimes that can take a while, can it? And sometimes it can take longer than people actually have, when you're trying to build a business, because especially if you're saying you and your husband were different.
Yeah, we're totally different. I mentioned I could be a bit up and down, especially back then. My husband's very stoic and straight down the
Yeah,
line. He's the yin to my yang, and actually we complement each other
absolutely.
brilliantly with completely opposing skill sets. But yeah, there was times that you could have walked into that office and that wasn't the case. We'd never been a shouty couple. We bicker like everyone else.
Yeah.
But I remember there was actually an instance where I was actually screaming. I'm not proud of this, but I was screaming at my husband. And then I just stayed back. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What on earth? And no one could hear. It was just us. But I thought, wow, this is not bringing out the best side of me. And going back to the point you were saying about Tony Robbins, I think I'm a bit of a diva. I'm going to be completely honest. If I don't like something, if I don't want to do something, I just don't do it. I just don't do it. If something doesn't hold my interest, I just don't do it. And obviously, when you're starting out in business, there's things that really you are meant to do. But my superpower
Yeah.
is getting other people to do it. Like, genuinely, I'm
Okay.
not very talented, but I am very good at connecting with talented
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
I'm very good at identifying the gaps I don't want to fill that gap though. I'm just very good at identifying the
Yeah.
gap and then bringing somebody in
Yeah.
to sort of plug that hole,
Talent
if you
spotting.
like. Talent spotting, yeah. I mean, if you want anything done, go and ask a lazy person. I'm a lazy person. You know, I want to do things with the least amount of effort so I can go and focus on other things. And actually, I realized after about 2 years that I've got no interest in property
Yeah.
whatsoever, like absolutely none. It was a vehicle. I'll be very grateful
Yes.
to property for affording us a certain lifestyle, which allowed me to then go and launch my podcast and
Yeah.
do what I'm truly passionate about, because the property business bankrolled that for the first two
Yeah.
years. You know, it was costing me thousands and thousands of pounds a month
Yeah.
before I started getting sponsorship and things like that. So
So how, so what I mean, because people listening, right? You've gone from this journey, where things are going well, then you've had 10 years on medication, you've had the ups and the downs, been made redundant, you've had the emotional ups and downs, then you've gone on the personal development, the property journey, these courses, learned so much, realized that isn't for you, but like you say, it created the wealth,
yeah.
etc., etc. Where did the podcast come? Like, where did that idea even come from? Like, because it's just non-related to anything you've done up to that point.
So, okay, there's a few things. There's probably a few little gaps I'll fill in as we go. My old mentor, Billy, going back to Billy Farrell, he
Mm-hmm.
told me, so the thing that I was very good at within the property business was raising the finance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what I did. It was the people element, whether that was in
Influencing people.
person or
Yes.
whether that was online. And he told me that the best way to do that was through LinkedIn. Now, I'd never even heard of LinkedIn. So I started posting on LinkedIn. But for full transparency, I couldn't talk much about property because we didn't have any properties.
Mm-hmm.
So I positioned myself as a preeminent authority, but I was mindful not to tell any lies either. When we completed this property training course, just to give you a little bit of an insight, we secured 2 properties within 4 days. We had no money, didn't
Wow.
have any of our own capital,
Mm-hmm.
but we worked with a joint venture partner
Yeah.
who would met on the training course. He agreed to fund it 100%, and we were doing like a 50-50 joint venture.
Yeah.
And that's how we did it. But 2 properties within 4 days
Wow.
of doing the property. So even though we'd secured those, we didn't have the keys for months. You know, it's like you've still got to go
Yeah.
through the
Yeah. Yeah.
conveyancing
Yeah.
process and things like that. So I'm posting on LinkedIn and I'm talking about the usual generic stuff if you're in that sector. Have you got money sat lying in your bank account? Are you aware what your pension's doing? You know, you're
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
this point 0.01% on your interest, where we can give you 10%. And of course, nobody was liking the post because there are about 50 million of those all over LinkedIn from all the property investment strategists, whatever
Yes.
a
Yes. Yes.
property
Yes.
investment strategist is. You know, it's just something that's basically been on a course. I was getting nowhere fast. So, anyway, I decided to talk about things that I did feel qualified to talk about, which was the practicalities of trying to scale a business with a young family. I had a 6-month-old baby. I had a 1-year-old. I had another child under the age of
Yeah.
5. Yet I was traveling. I was putting myself out there. I was going to all these networking events. I was having all these meetings. I was dealing with the mum guilt. I was speaking about mental health. I was speaking about imposter syndrome. I
Yeah.
was speaking about shiny object syndrome when you're comparing yourself to others and getting distracted and things like that. And my engagement started to go through the roof because people could relate to the authenticity.
Mm.
Now, personal brand is actually quite common now, but 5 years ago, this wasn't really a
Mm.
thing. So, traditionally, professional, whatever professional means, platform, a corporate platform like LinkedIn, you know, this was a relatively new style of content.
Mm-hmm.
And people were messaging me and telling me that a video that I put up or a post I'd done had actually stopped them from taking their own lives. I've had many, many people telling me that. I've had people telling me that they've went for a job that they didn't think was within their skill set. It
Mm-hmm.
was like 10, 15 grand more than their current position because of something I've said. They've went for it and they've got it. And I'm getting all of these different messages. And as I'm going through my own journey, it sounds cliche, But I'm starting to realise that my definition of success is not attached to how much money I've got in my bank account or how many properties I've got.
Mm.
I've had money, I've lost money. I've had money again, I've lost money. I've been through this process many, many times. In 2016, we avoided bankruptcy by the skin of our teeth. We've been in hairy situations with the property business. We've lost tens of thousands of pounds. We've been rug pulled on multi-million-pound developments. It's not sunshine and rainbows. It wasn't a case of going on a course and you became a multi-millionaire or
No, of
anything like
course,
that.
especially in that game. I get it.
But I did realise that this is what I was passionate about. And during lockdown in 2020 or early 2021? Yeah, 2020. Like everyone else, I was at home and I had a wonderful time with our kids, actually. It was an amazing time to all connect as a family. I really learned so many valuable lessons about mindfulness, about spirituality, about connection, about getting out in nature and really appreciating what's already on our doorstep. That, I can't complain. There was people that had it a lot worse than I did. But as the week started to evolve, I did feel like I was losing my identity a bit. And I was Ellie the mum, yes, that was amazing. But I wasn't Ellie the entrepreneur. I wasn't Ellie who was talking on stage, which I was doing quite regularly up at that point, up and down the country, talking at property events because we had quite a big profile and things like that.
Yeah.
The masterminds and everything else, the client meetings. I really thrived on that in-person energy. And I thought, well, what can I do to stimulate myself? Really, this wasn't at this point about adding value to other people, but how do I network? So I thought I was doing a meditation. It sounds really woo-woo because actually I've not done any meditation probably for over 12 months now, but I'd just been introduced to TM meditation
I've done
just
it. I've done
before.
it. I know. Yeah.
And I was doing it religiously at the time. I was doing it twice a day.
Yeah.
And during one of my meditations, it came to me it wasn't a podcast at the time, but it was to do a series of live interviews through Facebook called the Sunday series. So the second I finished this meditation, I fired off some voice notes to people before I had chance to change my mind to ask if they would allow me to interview them live on this Sunday series. And the whole premise of it was a bit of a chat show type thing. So you brought a glass of wine or your alcohol-free beer or whatever you didn't drink. And it was like an Alan Carr sort of style, more relaxed vibe. And it sounds ridiculous, but I was just shocked at how many people were interested in listening to this, which compared to the podcast download numbers was quite insignificant, but it was hundreds, sometimes thousands of people were watching the replays of these videos or watching live with us. And I couldn't believe that I could have that connection from my own home. Whereas up until that point, I would travel to London or Manchester or wherever else, always at my own expense, never got paid for the public speaking, just to maybe speak in front of a room of 50 people or 100 people at most, to, maybe onboard one client or sometimes no clients. And here I was sat in Doncaster, no hassle, and thousands of people were able to connect and knew, who I was. And people just said I had a bit of a talent for it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was just a real great way of adding value. As I was learning, as I was growing as a person, I was also giving that gift to so many other people. But when the world reopened and I'd lost my captured audience, that was the pivotal moment where I decided to take the Sunday series and continue it in a different format and create the On a Mission podcast.
Wow. So what was the first step? Was there a specific strategy? Did you like try and identify, I need to get certain X amount of guests, or what was the how did it start? Because obviously I know it's grown immensely since then.
I'm laughing because I am very good at coming across as professional, and I'm just not. Honestly, I've paid hundreds of thousands of pounds in mentorship, masterminds, coaching programs, and every single mentor that I've ever had just scratches their head in complete amazement that I've achieved anything with my life because I'm terrible for following any sort of advice. There was no system. People don't want to hear this. They want to know that, there's
what's
a process.
the magic? Yeah, exactly.
What's the magic? I believe in energy.
Wow.
I believe in following your intuition. And I've really started listening to that internal wisdom, which is something that I used to do back in the day and I switched off for a lot of years. Probably the medication suppressed a lot of that. But yeah, I would I would just get ideas. I might be out walking the dog or something really random like that, and a person would pop into my head and I would just act on it that very second, send a random little Instagram message or something. And I couldn't believe people were saying yes. It helped initially because I was quite well connected because of my masterminds and things like that. But there was a guy that we knew who was a property sourcer. He used to be an estate agent, and in his past life, he'd been a boxing promoter, and he happened to know Ricky Hatton's manager. So he said to me, "Oh, I think I'll be able to get you Ricky Hatton." And it was one of those you think, yeah, he's a bit of a wheeler dealer.
Yeah,
I
of course,
thought, bit of a Del boy, great guy. But I just thought, yeah, of course he can, Ricky Hatton.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind, I've not even launched the podcast at this point.
You hadn't even launched a podcast?
Not even launched a podcast. Anyway, he did. He got in touch with the manager and he got me Ricky Hatton. So we were meant to be doing it on Zoom. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to chance my arm here and say, look, can we come and do it in person? So it was in 3 days' time. They said, yeah, no problem at all. Come and record it at Hatton's gym. Come and do it in the boxing ring. So I've got Kira, who's an apprentice, a digital marketing apprentice, never done any sort of videography or anything in her life. Rang her up. Firstly, I said to her, "You're not going to believe this. I'm ecstatic. I'm jumping around. You'll never guess who we've got on the podcast." She's like, "Oh, who is it? Who is it?" I said, "It's Ricky Hatton." And she was like, "Who's Ricky Hatton?" So that was a bit of a killjoy. Kira was like 18 years old at the time. I was like, "Oh, ask your dad." Anyway, I said to her, right, credit to Kira here, because I said to her, "You've got 2 options and I'm not going to judge you. This is an opportunity of a lifetime." We should use words like that because it turns out it wasn't an opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah, but it was an exciting moment.
It was a very exciting moment. I said, "I'm more than happy to hire a videographer to come to record it and to do all the editing and things like that. Or we can find out what equipment to get. I can put you in touch with some videographers. You can chat with them, you can Zoom with them, you can watch YouTube videos, you can do whatever you need to do. But you've got 3 days to get the equipment sorted and become a world-class videographer because I won't accept anything substandard. What do you want to do?" She was like, "Right, let's do it." And we did it, and we pulled it off.
Wow.
We pulled it out of the bag. And from that point on, really, it was quite easy. Because if you're lucky enough to secure a guest like Ricky Hatton, people then don't ask you about your download numbers, which was great because I only really had my mum and dad that were listening at that point.
No, of course.
You can approach people
It builds
and
that
say,
credibility already because he's such a familiar face that it's easy to get buy-in of other people then.
Yeah, if it's good enough for Ricky, there's just a presumption
that's true.
that you've got an established podcast, that you're getting hundreds of thousands of downloads, you know? So that was my gateway.
But for me, the big takeaway from that, for anyone listening, it's tenacious. Be clear on what you want and what's the worst that happens. Don't take no for an answer, and it's just.
Can I just say on that point though, because when you say be clear on what you want, so I don't want to go against all the other coaches, but for me, I've never really been that clear on what I want. I've only ever really known the next step. It does sound cheesy, but I'm only ever trying to be better than the person I was yesterday. So when we get that interview and then we do the editing, it's reviewing it all. How could we have made that process slicker? How could we have made the onboarding slicker? How could we have set that up better? How could we have improved the lighting? How could we have improved the editing? How can we outsource this? How can we systemize that? But it's only ever really, and James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habit.
Brilliant. He's a genius, that man.
He's
ridiculous.
That book resonated with me so much because everyone talks about and I do it now, I do 90-day goals, but I still to this day can't go above 90-day goals. I'm genuinely just trying to be the best version of myself. And sometimes I think that the goals we have, certainly speaking from my own experience, are ones that actually have been imposed on us subconsciously by other people. Because if you'd have asked me 12 months ago, what's your goal, Ellie? I want to be bigger than Joe Rogan. I want to get billions of downloads and all that. And actually now I genuinely don't care about any of that. I just want to have better quality interviews. I want to become better at interviewing. I want to get better at listening. I want to get better at attracting good quality guests. I want to get better at understanding the different social media platforms and the different algorithms. And I want to get better at our production. And, I know that when we follow those processes, the downloads and things will inevitably come. But by focusing on the downloads, and I know that's a controversial thing to say, and the retention and all the other metrics and things that we're conditioned to study religiously.
And I suppose in a way that as James Clear, they're at your control.
Yeah.
Whereas the things that are within your control will likely improve the things that you wish you had control of, which is the numbers and the growth and all that stuff. Because I know James Clear is massive, and I know we're huge on this since I built to last. It's the process. If you can control the process, the systems, the boring stuff that people don't see, whether it's health, fitness, or building a great podcast, it's that you get the reps in with that stuff. That's the stuff that builds a confidence as well. I know we spoke about this on your podcast, isn't it, as well? But when you know you're preparing right, you're forward planning, you're evaluating how could that have gone a bit better? Because I'm the same. I've never once done a podcast and thought, oh God, I could have been better there. Of course, you take the positives as well, but it's that constant state of improvement mentality, and by default you create your own luck sometimes, with the opportunities. But share as well with the listeners, for anyone listening, because I know this also goes out on YouTube. Who else have you had on the podcast?
Oh goodness, you put me on the spot now.
I know have you had Eddie Hearn and his dad?
I've had Eddie and Barry. Yeah.
But Eddie, what was Eddie like to it?
I love
I like Eddie Hearn. I think he's brilliant. I think he's a breath of fresh air for boxing. I think he's charismatic. He's funny.
They were very different. Barry, you can tell he's at a different point in his life. We went to Maskell's. We had the privilege of going to Maskell's to interview both of them. But Barry's semi-retired. He's meant to be fully retired. He doesn't, I said to him, Barry, you're world-class at a lot of things, but retirement is definitely not one of them. But he was just amazing. He's very warm, very welcoming. He spent hours with us after the cameras were rolling and things. An amazing guy. Eddie, charming, the same off camera as he was on camera, but clearly very driven. It was great. We built a good rapport, but you can tell that this is a media commitment. This is one of
you imagine how many engagements. No, I get it. But I mean, it's unbelievable. So how long you had the podcast officially now then?
Oh, only like 2.5 years, and it's brilliant. What I love about it is people tell you to niche down. Again, I just thought, well, why am I doing this? Because initially it wasn't a money-making thing. It's only very recently, actually, that we've started to make it it's become a commercial asset, if you like. So for me, I just wanted to have the conversations that I wanted to have, and I'm interested in a broad range of subjects. So, like, my mission, really, if you ask me, I like to say to my guests, what is your mission? But my mission is to learn, to grow as a person, and to share that journey with other people, and impart not necessarily my knowledge, but the knowledge of the guests that can add value to the listeners. But I am very interested in a whole wide range of subject, not just business. Actually, business doesn't interest me that much. It's more the process of who you have to become. I like to hear the tales of adversity, what people did to cultivate their mindset. Is there any sort of commonalities? I'm interested in the life stories, but I'm also interested in getting the real, raw, uncut versions of people, not just the generic
polished
stuff that they tend to do on the podcast rounds. So, for that reason, we have subjects. You mentioned Eddie Hearn and the boxers. I've had the founder of Reebok on, Joe Foster. I see relationships are the highest form of currency. Julie and Joe are now dear friends of ours. We meet up with those regularly, and we meet up with them regularly. To me, that's something that would never have happened had it not been through the podcast. We've had Mark Victor Hansen on, who co-authored the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. I've got all sorts of TV personalities. I've just interviewed Mo Gowda,
he's amazing.
Yeah, incredible guy. I've got Stephen Bartlett's coming on. I've just got access now to more and more people. You're only ever a few connections away. But I've also had, I'm interested, like you are, in health, in natural health. I'm also interested in calling out the bullshit. I've had doctors on, I've had scientists on, I've had some what some people might consider controversial people on. They're not controversial to me, but that's a story for another day. So yeah, athletes, I've had Olympians, all sorts of people, business leaders, Daniel Priestley, just social media influencers. But I've also had people talking about human trafficking and paedophile rings. There's literally nothing that's off limit. We've had ex-gang leaders. We've had reformed drug dealers, drug kingpins that have been in custody for years, banged up abroad. And anyone with an interesting story, anyone that's on a mission to leave this world a better place than they found it.
No, I mean, I mean, that's I think it's a great place to sort of wrap us up. I mean, that's maybe why we hit it off just like that. And generally we like people who are operating with purpose, because when someone's operating with purpose and they've got a meaning behind what they do, you feed off that energy, don't you? And I'm exactly the same. Any guest I bring on, it's what's the story? And I don't think there's anyone really. If you listen to this, a lot of people pat themselves down really about how they can influence other people. Everyone's got a superpower. Everyone's got a trait. Everyone's got a thing or an experience they've been through that can help someone else. But so often they just bottle it up inside. So.
And perhaps they don't recognise the value that they hold within them as well. I think it's a limiting belief. It's certainly something that held me back for a lot of years. People aren't going to be interested in anything I've got to say, you know?
Yeah. But I don't know, was it yesterday I was listening to, I think it was a Jay Shetty podcast actually. I remember I was listening to, I don't usually listen to it with the greatest respect to him. I mean, he's a monster, like he's got a huge podcast. But I remember him saying so often, similar to what you've just said, a lot of people think that they don't have nothing to help or share with someone, but so often the advice you need or the shoulder you need to lean on is only a few steps ahead of you. And it's the same with wherever you are just now. If you're a few years older than someone, or you're a few steps ahead of someone in a certain career path, or maybe just a further stage of your life, there's always someone that you can help.
Yes.
Just behind that, and equally, there's always someone you can lean on just above. But especially now in the world, there's so many resources you have access to, and great podcasts. But I know that's my mission too. Life's far too short to look back when your storybook's up, whether that's in 40, 50, 60 years time for you or me or whoever, anyone's listening, and think, what if? I wish I was brave enough to step into that person I wanted to become, and just leave it all on the table. And I think that's where maybe we can wrap this up with both aligned is, I know what it's like to waste. I said this at my last Dubai event, from the age of 13, not waste because it's made me hear me and you share this story today and made me the coach I am, and no doubt made you the great listener, communicate you are with your podcast. But I know what it's like to waste from the age of 13, or not utilize the ages from 13 to 27 of untapped potential because you weren't brave enough to step up.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're the same, Ellie. I don't want people to, whether I'm coach or care or you listen to this, don't waste 14 days or 13 days, let alone 14 years, because God, you can bypass those emotional roadblocks, physical roadblocks, mental roadblocks, if you just listen to people who've been there, got the t-shirt,
People act like they're going to live forever.
Yeah.
And it's just not the case. You don't want to be on your deathbed with regrets. I want to feel like whether I've tried and failed, I would rather actually try. But if you knew your time was up in 5 years, you would probably live very differently to the way you're living today. And if that resonates with you, then that's probably a little red flag that you need to make some changes.
1,000,000%. One of my favourite Brennan Bouchard questions, I did that certified high performance course. It was brilliant. Amazing man with questions. And I've said this on previous podcasts, but it's a question that will never go out of fashion. It's one of his favourites. What would your best future self say in this situation? And I've tweaked it. What would your best future self say, do, or choose in this situation when you've got a decision to make? Because so often when you fast forward 30, 40, 50 years and you look back, you just make a more empowering decision that's based on your vision rather than fear. It's you might take a punt on yourself. So
Powerful.
yeah, Ellie, where can people find you?
Oh, you can't get away from me. I'm everywhere. On a Mission podcast, if anyone's interested in that. We're on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook.
Mm, awesome. Ellie, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have you on again.
Oh, and thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you so much, guys, for listening. I'll see you next time.